She hit me and screamed, "Sign the papers, old hag." I stayed quiet. The next morning, I cooked a feast. She smiled. Until she saw the handcuffs on the table. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M4 morning, A4 afternoon, or E4 evening. Now, let me take you into this story. My daughter laid a hand on me inside my own kitchen, and I didn't say a word. I didn't scream, I didn't fight back, and I didn't cry. But the next morning, when she came downstairs thinking I had finally accepted her disrespect and her cruelty, she froze in sheer terror when she saw who was sitting at my dining room table. I was sitting at the head of the table, smoothing out the antique lace tablecloth, when Stephanie walked into the room with that air of hers, like she owned the world, or at least, like she owned my house. She hadn't even noticed the swelling on my lip, or maybe she just didn't care. She was so focused on herself. She grabbed a biscuit, took a huge bite, and started talking about how things were going to change in this house now that I was finally being reasonable. But the words died in her throat when the chair next to me moved. Her face, which had been flushed from the hangover and the sheer arrogance of her youth, turned gray, like she'd seen a ghost. The biscuit fell from her hand and crumbled on the hardwood floor. She knew in that 1 second that my silence the night before hadn't been fear. It had been a verdict. But for you to understand how we got to this breakfast that felt more like a courtroom than a meal, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Lorraine Miller. I'm 62 years old, a widow, and I live in a beautiful, sprawling Victorian home in a historic neighborhood just outside of Charleston. You know the kind of house, wraparound porches, ancient oak trees dripping with Spanish moss, the kind of place that smells like old wood and beeswax. I've always been a peaceful woman. I spent 40 years as a nurse, 20 of them as a head nurse at the county hospital. I raised my daughter on my own after my Arthur passed away suddenly from a stroke. I worked double shifts, missed holidays, and sacrificed my own comfort so she would never want for anything. But until about 6 hours ago, I didn't know I was sleeping with the enemy right under my own roof. It all happened, or maybe it all finally fell apart, around 3 in the morning. Stephanie came home. I was in the kitchen, sitting in my rocking chair in the dark, clutching my robe, listening to the rain hammer against the glass. The sound that startled me wasn't the thunder, it was the key scraping aggressively in the front door lock. She stumbled in, smelling of cheap vodka and stale cigarettes. I stayed quiet. She threw her keys on the hall table, and I heard something break. It was a picture frame, a photo of her father. She didn't even look back. She walked into the kitchen, and when she saw me, her anger just seemed to swell up like a rogue wave. She started yelling, saying it was my fault her life was a mess, that I cared more about this stupid museum of a house than I did about her happiness. She slapped a document onto the kitchen island. The power of attorney papers. "Sign it, old hag," she slurred, her eyes wild. "Sign it so we can sell this place and I can finally get my share." I got up slowly and said, "Daughter, go to bed. You're not well." That's all it took. That was the trigger. She came at me, a 32-year-old woman, strong, fueled by rage and entitlement, against her own mother. She grabbed me by my arms and shook me so hard I felt my teeth rattle. And then she shoved me. I went flying into the counter. My hip hit the granite hard, and my head cracked against the cupboard door. And it didn't stop there. She raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound was loud, a sickening crack in the silent kitchen. The pain was hot and immediate. I tasted iron in my mouth right away. My lip was split. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stayed there, crumpled up on the floor, looking at her. And her? She just huffed, stepped over my legs like I was a pile of dirty laundry, and went upstairs, leaving her mother bleeding in the kitchen. The silence in the house after that was heavy. You know the kind of quiet after something breaks and there's no fixing it? That was the sound of my heart finally hardening. I went to the little powder room mirror. I washed my face with cold water. I saw the cut on my lip, the start of a bruise on my cheek. In that moment, looking into my own eyes, I didn't see a victim. I saw the Lorraine who had managed emergency rooms, who had saved lives, who had survived the death of her soulmate. I decided right then and there. That was the last time. I went back to the kitchen, cleaned up the blood, and instead of going to bed to cry, I started cooking. It was the only thing I could do to keep from losing my mind. I got out the flour, the butter, the baking powder. I used the heavy cast iron skillets Arthur had bought me for our 10th anniversary. I baked dozens of biscuits. I made grits with heavy cream and cheddar. I fried bacon. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, Stephanie finally came down. She looked terrible, puffy-eyed and disheveled, but she had that smirk. She saw the food and thought she had one. She sat down, piled her plate high, and looked at me with that sickening triumph. "See," she said, chewing with her mouth open. "You finally learned. A little discipline goes a long way. Now, after breakfast, you're going to sign those papers, and we're going to call the nursing home." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was steady. I walked toward the front door. "Mom? Where are you going?" she barked, a piece of bacon falling from her mouth. "I didn't say you could leave." I ignored her. I put my hand on the cold brass knob of the front door. This was the moment. The point of no return. I opened the door to let the morning air in, and along with it, the end of her world. If you are listening to this and you can feel my heart beating in your chest, please, do me a favor. Like this video and comment the number 1 down below. Let me know you are with me. Let me know I am not alone in this fight. Your support is the only thing keeping me standing right now. Comment 1 if you're ready to see justice served. Now, let me tell you who walked through that door. The morning air rushed into the hallway, crisp and damp from the night's storm, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. It was a stark contrast to the stifling, toxic atmosphere inside the house. Standing on my porch were 3 people who looked like Judgment Day incarnate. First, there was Harriet Vance. Judge Harriet Vance, I should say. She's been my neighbor for 30 years, a woman who broke glass ceilings when most women were still expected to just serve coffee. Even at 70, retired, she was terrifying in the most magnificent way. She was wearing a sharp charcoal blazer, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, and she wasn't holding a casserole dish. She was holding a leather briefcase. Next to her stood Detective Frank Reynolds. I've known Frank since he was a rookie cop patrolling our neighborhood. He used to wave at Arthur when he was mowing the lawn. Now, he was a seasoned detective with a badge that caught the morning light and a face set in stone. Behind him were 2 uniformed officers, their hands resting near their belts, their expressions professional and grim. "Good morning, Lorraine," Harriet said. Her voice wasn't the warm tone she used when we drank tea in her garden. It was her courtroom voice, low, resonant, and absolutely commanding. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Breakfast is served." We walked down the hallway. The sound of our footsteps, the click of Harriet's heels, the heavy thud of police boots, echoed like a drumroll. We entered the dining room. Stephanie was just reaching for the coffee pot. When she looked up and saw the procession entering the room, her hand froze in midair. The color didn't just drain from her face, it vanished, leaving her looking like raw dough. She dropped the coffee pot. It didn't break, but it hit the saucer with a loud clatter that made everyone flinch, everyone except Harriet. What is this?" Stephanie stammered, pushing her chair back. The screech of the wooden legs against the floor was agonizing. "Mom? Who are these people? Why are there cops in my house?" Harriet didn't even look at her. She walked straight past Stephanie, her eyes fixed on the head of the table, the chair opposite mine. The chair that had belonged to Arthur. the chair Stephanie had tried to claim for herself ever since she moved back in. Harriet pulled it out with a deliberate, smooth motion and sat down. She placed her briefcase on the table, right on top of the lace tablecloth, pushing aside a bowl of fruit. Frank and the officers remained standing, blocking the doorway, a wall of blue uniform and authority. "Sit down, Stephanie," Harriet said. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. It was an order, not a request. Stephanie looked at Frank, then at the officers, and finally at me. Her eyes were wide, darting around like a trapped animal. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a primal fear. She sank back into her chair, her hands trembling so badly she had to hide them in her lap. "This is harassment," Stephanie squeaked, trying to summon some of her usual bravado but failing miserably. "I want you out of my house." "Mom, tell them to leave. This is a private family breakfast." "It ceased to be a private family matter the moment you decided to treat your mother like a punching bag," Harriet said, opening her briefcase. She pulled out a sleek, digital voice recorder and set it on the table. The little red light blinked on. Frank stepped forward then. He looked at Stephanie with a mixture of disappointment and professional detachment. "Stephanie Miller," he said, his voice filling the room. "We received a distress call from this address at 4:15 a.m. The caller reported an assault. And further investigation has revealed disturbing details regarding the intent behind that assault." Stephanie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Assault?" She fell. "She's clumsy. She's got dementia, she doesn't know what she's saying. Look at her, she's confused." She pointed a shaking finger at me. I stood there, near the sideboard, my posture straight, my hands folded. I didn't look confused. I looked like a woman who was done. Harriet adjusted her glasses and looked Stephanie dead in the eye. "We are not here to discuss her balance, Stephanie. We are here to discuss the power of attorney you've been trying to coerce her into signing. We are here to discuss the finances. And we are here to discuss the little bottle of blue pills found in your nightstand." Stephanie stopped breathing. The air in the room seemed to be sucked out. I watched my daughter. I looked for a shred of the little girl I had raised, the one with pigtails who used to cry when she scraped her knee. But that girl was gone. In her place was a stranger who viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle between her and a pile of money. "I don't know what you're talking about," Stephanie whispered, but her eyes were glued to Frank's holster. "We have a lot to talk about," I said finally, speaking for the first time since they entered. My voice was calm, but inside, I was screaming. "But before we get to the handcuffs, I think we should talk about the house. The house you want so badly." I walked over to the window and looked out at the garden Arthur had planted. "You think you deserve this legacy? You think you're entitled to it?" I turned back to her. "Let me tell you what this legacy actually cost." Harriet nodded at me, a silent signal. The trial had begun. To understand why Stephanie felt so entitled to this house, you have to understand what this house represents. It's not just bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of everything Arthur and I built from nothing. I wasn't always the quiet woman in the kitchen. 40 years ago, I was a force of nature. I was the youngest head nurse in the history of St. Jude's Hospital. I managed a staff of 50, handled life and death situations daily, and could spot a liar or a drug seeker from the moment they walked through the triage doors. I made a good salary, a very good salary. I was independent, fierce, and proud. Then I met Arthur. He was an architect with big dreams and empty pockets. We fell in love hard and fast. When we found this house, it was a wreck. The roof was caving in, the windows were shattered, and the garden was a jungle of weeds. But Arthur saw the bones of it. He saw the potential. "Lorraine," he told me, standing in what is now the dining room, surrounded by dust and debris, "this is where our children will grow up. This is where we'll grow old. We bought it for a song, but we paid for it with sweat. For 10 years, every spare dollar went into this house. I picked up extra shifts, working nights and weekends, missing parties, missing sleep. My entire salary went into the mortgage and the renovation materials. Arthur did the work himself. He sanded every floorboard by hand. He restored the crown molding. He built the gazebo in the back. When Stephanie was born, she was our miracle. We had tried for years. When she finally arrived, she became the center of our universe. Arthur doted on her. He built her a dollhouse that was a perfect replica of our home. He called her Princess. And maybe that was our mistake. We wanted to give her everything we didn't have. I remember when I made the decision to step back from my career. Stephanie was 5, and she was crying because I was always at the hospital. Arthur's firm was taking off, and he said, "Stay home, Lori. You've worked hard enough. Be with her. Let me take care of the money." So I did. I traded my scrubs for aprons. I traded the adrenaline of the ER for PTA meetings and ballet recitals. I poured all that energy, all that intelligence, into being the perfect mother and wife. I managed our investments, I handled the household accounts, and I made sure Stephanie had the best of everything: private schools, horse riding lessons, a college fund that was fully paid up by the time she was 12. I didn't regret it. Not then. I loved my family. But looking back, I see how I made myself invisible. I became the infrastructure of their lives, essential, but unnoticed. To Stephanie, money was just something that appeared in her account. She never saw the double shifts. She never saw Arthur's calloused hands. She just saw the result. When Arthur died 5 years ago, it shattered me. A massive stroke, right there in the garden he loved. He was gone before he hit the ground. I lost my partner, my best friend, my anchor. And Stephanie? She cried at the funeral, looking beautiful in black. But before the dirt was even settled on his grave, she asked me, "Mom, did Dad leave me the lake house?" It was a small question, but it felt like a slap. "Everything is in trust, Stephanie," I had told her. "Until I pass, everything remains with me." She hadn't liked that. But she was busy then, busy with her second husband, busy spending her own settlement money, busy living a high-flying life in Atlanta. She visited on holidays, complained about the drive, ate my food, and left. I was lonely, yes. But I was managing. I had my garden. I had Harriet next door. I had my memories. Then, 2 years ago, Stephanie's world collapsed. Her husband left her for a younger woman, karma, some might say, since she had done the same to his first wife. Her lifestyle business selling overpriced cosmetics went bankrupt. She was drowning in debt, facing lawsuits, and had nowhere to go. She called me at midnight, sobbing. "Mom, I have nothing. Can I come home? Just for a few weeks? Just until I get back on my feet?" What was I supposed to do? She was my daughter. My flesh and blood. The little girl Arthur had loved more than life itself. "Of course," I said. "Come home." If I could go back to that moment, I would hang up the phone. I would lock the doors. I would change the locks. But I didn't. I opened the door, and I let the vampire in. She arrived with a U-Haul full of designer clothes and a bitterness that poisoned the air. The few weeks turned into months. She didn't look for a job. She slept until noon. She drank wine starting at 2 p.m. And slowly, subtly, the dynamic began to change. It started with small comments. "Mom, you left the stove on again," she would say, even though I knew I hadn't. "Mom, you told me that story yesterday, don't you remember? Mom, you're shaking, are you taking your vitamins?" She was planting seeds. Seeds of doubt. Seeds of incompetence. She was gaslighting me, trying to make me believe that the sharp, capable head nurse was turning into a senile old woman. And for a while, because I loved her and because grief can make you foggy, I almost believed her. The transformation of my home from a sanctuary into a prison didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, creeping rot. When Stephanie first moved back in, she played the role of the wounded bird perfectly. She would sit on the porch swing, staring blankly at the driveway, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I just don't know how to start over, Mom," she'd whisper. "It's so hard." I cooked her favorite meals. I did her laundry because she said her back hurt. I paid off her credit card debt, over $15,000, because she said the collectors were threatening to sue her and she was terrified of going to jail. "I'll pay you back, Mom," she promised, hugging me, "as soon as I get a job." But the job hunt was a farce. She would spend hours on her laptop, claiming she was applying for marketing positions. Later, I checked the browser history. She was shopping for shoes and chatting on dating apps. When I gently suggested she might look for something simpler, maybe a receptionist job just to get out of the house, she exploded. "A receptionist? Me?" She laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "I have a degree, Mom. I'm not going to answer phones like some servant. You just don't understand the modern economy." Then came the medical concerns. Stephanie started insisting she accompany me to my doctor's appointments. At first, I thought it was sweet. But in the exam room, she would interrupt Dr. Evans. "She's been forgetting things, doctor," she would say, looking concerned. "Leaving the keys in the fridge. Getting lost driving to the grocery store. I'm really worried about, early onset dementia." I would protest. I did not get lost. There was construction on Main Street. Dr. Evans would look at me with pity. "It's okay, Lorraine. Stress can cause memory lapses." Stephanie was painting a picture of me as incompetent to the outside world. And at home, she was making me feel crazy. Objects would move. My reading glasses would vanish from the nightstand and appear in the bathroom sink. My checkbook would go missing, only to be found in the trash can. "Oh, Mom," she'd sigh, picking it out of the bin. "You threw it away again? We really need to talk about getting you some help. I can't watch you 24/7. The phrase power of attorney first appeared about 6 months ago. She brought it up over dinner, casual as you please. "With your health declining, it might be safer if I handled the bills," she said, cutting into a steak I had paid for. "It's just a formality. In case something happens. You don't want the state to take control, do you?" "I'm fine, Stephanie," I said firmly. "I manage my own money." That night, she didn't speak to me. She slammed doors until the house shook. Then the drinking got worse. She stopped hiding the wine bottles. She started bringing friends over, loud, rude people who treated my home like a frat house. They would smoke on the porch, leaving butts on Arthur's prized azaleas. When I asked them to stop, Stephanie would roll her eyes. "God, Mom, stop being such a killjoy. They're just having fun. You're so uptight." I felt myself shrinking. I started spending more time in my bedroom, reading, just to avoid the tension. I felt like a guest in my own home. A nuisance. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find a stranger in my living room. He was a man in his 40s, wearing a cheap suit that was too tight, with slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was looking at the fireplace, tapping on the mantel like he was testing the wood. "Mom," Stephanie said, walking in from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. "This is Brad. He's a friend." Brad turned and looked at me. He didn't see a person. He saw a seller. He saw a commission. "Nice place you got here, Mrs. Miller," he said. "Great bones. The market is hot right now. You could get a pretty penny for a lot this size." Developers are paying top dollar for land to build condos. My blood ran cold. Condos? On Arthur's land? This house is not for sale, I said, my voice shaking. Stephanie stepped forward, placing a hand on Brad's arm. Mom, don't be rude. Brad is a real estate specialist. He's just giving us an appraisal. You know, for the future. When you move to somewhere more manageable. I am not moving, I declared. Stephanie's smile dropped. Her eyes went flat and cold. We'll see about that, she muttered. That was the day the war truly began. Brad wasn't just a friend. He was a predator. And my daughter had opened the gate. Brad became a fixture in the house. He was slick, oily, and dangerous. He was a failed real estate broker who had lost his license once for unethical practices, something I found out later when I asked Harriet to run a background check. But to Stephanie, he was a savior. He was the man who whispered in her ear that she deserved more, that she was sitting on a gold mine, and the only thing standing in her way was the old lady. They stopped trying to hide their conversations. They would sit on the back porch, smoking, their voices drifting up to my bedroom window. The zoning laws just changed, I heard Brad say one evening. If we knock this place down, we can fit 4 luxury townhomes on the lot. We're talking $3 million, Steph. Easy. I know, Stephanie whined. But she won't sign. She's stubborn as a mule. She doesn't have to agree if she's not competent, Brad said. His voice dropped lower, but the night air carried it straight to my ears. How is the regimen going? She's groggy, Stephanie replied. Sleeping a lot. She fell in the hallway yesterday. My hand flew to my mouth. The regimen? For the past month, Stephanie had insisted on making me tea every night. Chamomile, Mom. It helps with your nerves. I had been drinking it, grateful for the small kindness. But lately, I had been waking up with headaches, feeling like my limbs were made of lead. I had been stumbling. I thought it was stress. I thought maybe Stephanie was right, maybe I was getting sick. But hearing them that night, the pieces clicked into place. The strange bitterness in the tea. The way Stephanie watched me drink it, her eyes intense and calculating. I wasn't sick. I was being drugged. I wanted to run downstairs and scream at them. But years of nursing training kicked in. Panic creates mistakes. Calculation saves lives. I needed proof. The next morning, while Stephanie was in the shower and Brad was passed out on the living room sofa, I snuck into the kitchen. I found the box of tea. It looked normal. But then I looked in the trash can, buried under coffee grounds. There were empty blister packs. Benzodiazepines. Strong sedatives. And something else, crushed residue of antipsychotics. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were poisoning me. Not enough to kill me instantly, but enough to make me look confused, unstable, and incompetent. Enough to convince a judge to grant guardianship. That afternoon, they cornered me in the living room. Brad had a folder. Lorraine, he said, using my first name with a familiarity I despised. We need to talk about your future. Stephanie is worried. We found a wonderful facility. It's called Golden Horizons. It's very affordable. He slid a brochure across the coffee table. It looked cheap. The paper was thin, the photos grainy. I knew the place. It was a state-run facility 2 towns over, known for neglect and overcrowding. It was a place where people went to die alone. I'm not going anywhere, I said, gripping the arms of my chair. Mom, please, Stephanie said, her voice fake sweet. It's for your own good. You're not safe here alone. You're forgetting things. You're falling. Brad can sell the house, and the money will pay for your care. I'll manage everything. You mean you'll spend everything? I snapped. Stephanie's face darkened. You selfish bitch, she hissed. You have all this space, all this money, and you just sit on it while I struggle? Dad would have wanted me to have this. Your father would be ashamed of you. I yelled back. That was the wrong thing to say. Stephanie stood up, knocking her wine glass over. Red wine stained the white carpet like blood. Don't you talk about him, she screamed. You turned him against me. You always wanted to be the saint. Brad stood up and put a hand on her shoulder, but he was looking at me with dead eyes. Mrs. Miller, you really should sign the papers. It would be so much easier. If you force us to go to court to declare you incompetent, it's going to get ugly. And with your medical condition, no one will believe you. Get out, I said. Both of you. Brad laughed. I'm not going anywhere. Steph invited me. And I'm uninviting you, I said. This is my house. Stephanie marched over to me, leaning down so her face was inches from mine. I could smell the wine and the malice. Not for long, Mom. Not for long. You're losing your mind. Everyone knows it. Just give up. They left the room, laughing as they went to the kitchen to open another bottle. I sat there, shaking, looking at the wine stain on the carpet. I realized then that this wasn't just greed. This was hatred. My daughter didn't just want my money, she wanted to destroy me for being the witness to her failures. That night, I didn't drink the tea. I poured it into a potted plant in my bedroom. And I waited. I knew something was coming. The pressure was building, and the explosion was inevitable. It was 3:15 a.m. when the front door slammed open. I knew the time because I had been staring at the digital clock on my nightstand for hours, unable to sleep, terrified to close my eyes. Brad had left around midnight, leaving Stephanie alone and raging. She had gone out to a bar, driving my car, I realized with a jolt, and now she was back. I heard her stumbling in the hallway downstairs. Then the crash. Glass shattering. I put on my robe. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to breathe. In, out. Assess the situation. I walked to the landing. Where is she? Stephanie was screaming at the walls. Where is the old witch? I walked down the stairs. The hallway light was off, but the lightning from the storm outside illuminated her silhouette. She was swaying, holding a half-empty bottle of vodka she must have bought on the way home. On the floor lay the wreckage of the hallway console table. And in the middle of the debris was the framed wedding photo of Arthur and me. The glass was pulverized. She had stomped on it. Her heel had gone right through Arthur's face. Something inside me snapped. That wasn't just glass. That was a desecration. Stephanie, I said, my voice cutting through the dark. She spun around, nearly losing her balance. There you are, she slurred. A cruel, lopsided grin spread across her face. The lady of the manor. The grieving widow. She kicked the shards of the photo toward me. He's dead, Mom. He's dead and he's not coming back to save you. It's just me. And I'm sick of waiting for you to die too. The words hit me harder than any fist. You are drunk, I said. Give me the keys. No, she roared. She lunged at me. I tried to step back, but I wasn't fast enough. She grabbed my shoulders. Her fingers dug into my flesh like talons. She was strong, fueled by adrenaline and alcohol. You think you're better than me? She spat, shaking me. You think you're so perfect with your nursing career and your perfect marriage? You're nothing. You're just a stingy old hag sitting on a pile of cash. Let go of me, I cried out. Sign the papers, she screamed. Sign the damn power of attorney. I have debts, Mom. Brad says we can sell this place next week. I need that money. I will never let you sell your father's house to buy drugs and pay off gambling debts. I yelled back. That was the breaking point. Her eyes went black. She didn't shove me this time. She drew her hand back and swung. The slap connected with the side of my face with a force that sent shockwaves through my skull. My glasses flew off. I spun around and crashed into the wall, sliding down to the floor. My head throbbed. My lips split against my teeth. I tasted the copper tang of blood. I lay there on the hardwood floor, stunned. My own daughter. The baby I had nursed. The girl I had comforted. She had hit me. Stephanie stood over me, breathing heavily. For a second, I thought she might apologize. I thought she might be horrified. But she just looked down at me with disgust. Look at you, she sneered. Pathetic. You can't even stand up. This proves it. You're incompetent. You're frail. She leaned down, grabbing a handful of my hair, forcing me to look at her. Tomorrow morning, she whispered, her breath foul, Brad is coming over with the notary. You are going to sign. Or I swear to God, I will put you in that home and you will never see the light of day again. Do you understand me? I didn't answer. I couldn't. She shoved my head back against the wall. Silence implies consent, she mocked. She stood up, took a swig from her vodka bottle, and stepped over my legs. Clean this mess up, she said, gesturing to the broken photo. I'm going to bed. She walked up the stairs, leaving me in the dark, bleeding, amidst the ruins of my memories. I listened to her bedroom door slam. I listened to the lock click. And then, silence. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, touching my swelling cheek. The physical pain was sharp, but the emotional pain, it was like an amputation. The cord that connected a mother to her child had been severed. She had cut it with violence. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. She thought fear would make me compliant. But she forgot who I was. She forgot I was the woman who ran the ER during Hurricane Hugo. She forgot I was the woman who held her father's hand as he took his last breath and didn't falter. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And for the first time in years, my mind was crystal clear. I dragged myself up using the banister. My hips screamed in protest, and the room spun for a moment, a lingering effect of the drugs and the blow to the head. But I forced myself to focus. Nurse mode. Triage. Assess. Act. I went into the kitchen, not to clean, but to think. I turned on the small under-cabinet light. I looked at the power of attorney document still sitting on the counter where she had left it days ago. I read the fine print. It was absolute. It gave her control over everything, my bank accounts, my medical decisions, the deed to the house. It even had a clause that allowed her to gift assets to herself. It was a robbery note dressed up in legal jargon. I realized then that this wasn't just about tonight. This was a premeditated extraction. And Brad was the architect. I needed hard evidence. The overheard conversation wasn't enough. The bruises were evidence of assault, but I needed to prove the intent to defraud and the poisoning. I took off my shoes so I could move silently. I went upstairs. I stood outside Stephanie's door. I could hear her heavy, drunken snoring. She was out cold. I turned the knob. Locked. Of course. But Stephanie was careless. She always had been. I knew she kept a spare key under the hallway rug because she was terrified of locking herself out when she went to the bathroom at night. I lifted the corner of the rug. There it was. I unlocked the door with the stealth of a thief. The room smelled of stale perfume and unwashed clothes. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. I went to her nightstand. I opened the drawer. It was a chaotic mess of receipts, makeup, and, there, a plastic baggie filled with blue pills. No prescription label. And next to it, a small vial of clear liquid. Haloperidol. An antipsychotic used to sedate aggressive patients. It creates confusion, lethargy, and muscle stiffness in healthy people. I took photos of everything with my phone. Then, I found the notebook. It was a spiral-bound notebook lying open on the floor next to her bag. I picked it up. It was in Stephanie's handwriting, but the notes were clearly dictated by Brad. Phase 1, isolation. Cut off Vance in the church group. Phase 2, gaslighting. Move items, confuse her. Phase 3, sedation. Increase dose in tea. Phase 4, the incident. Wait for a fall or provoke an outburst to prove instability. Goal, sell by November. Brad takes 20%. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. It was a checklist. A checklist for destroying a human being. A checklist for destroying her own mother. Phase 4, I whispered to myself. Provoke an outburst. Tonight was Phase 4. She wanted me to hit her back. She wanted a fight so she could call the police and say I was violent and demented. But I hadn't fought back. I had taken the hit. And by doing so, I had flipped the script. I carefully put everything back exactly as I found it. I backed out of the room and locked the door. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The bruise on my cheek was blooming, a dark purple flower of violence. My lip was swollen to twice its size. I looked like a victim. But as I stared at my reflection, the tears I had been holding back finally came. Not tears of sadness. Tears of pure, cold rage. I thought about the nights I rocked her to sleep. I thought about the college tuition. I thought about the car I bought her. I thought about the second chances, the third chances, the 100th chances. I washed my face. The cold water stung, but it woke me up. Goodbye, Stephanie, I whispered to the mirror. The bank of Mom is closed. The hotel of Mom is closed. And the heart of Mom is broken. I went downstairs. It was 4:15 a.m. I picked up the phone. I didn't call 911. I called Frank Reynolds' personal cell phone. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Lorraine? It's 4 a.m. Is everything okay? Frank, I said, my voice steady as steel. I need you to come over. And I need you to bring a warrant. My daughter just assaulted me. And Frank. I have proof she's been poisoning me to steal the house. There was a silence on the other end. Then the sound of rustling sheets. I'm on my way. Are you safe right now? She's asleep, I said. I'm safe. But Frank? Don't use the sirens. I want her to wake up to a surprise. Understood, he said. Then I called Harriet. She answered immediately, she's a light sleeper. Harriet, I said. It's time. Did she do it? Harriet asked. We had suspected the financial abuse, but the violence, that was the line. She hit me. And I found the drugs. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Harriet said. Put on a pot of coffee, Lorraine. We're going to hold court. I hung up. I looked around my kitchen. It was a crime scene of my life. But I was going to clean it up. I was going to set the stage. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was the prosecution. And breakfast was going to be the opening statement. For the next 3 hours, I moved with the precision of a surgeon. The adrenaline had burned off the lethargy from the sedatives, leaving me in a state of hyperfocus. First, I tended to my wounds. I cleaned the cut on my lip with antiseptic. I put ice on my cheek to bring down the swelling, but not too much. I needed the bruise to be visible. I needed it to be undeniable. I applied a layer of foundation, not to hide the injury completely, but to make it look like I tried to hide it. There is something more tragic, more damning, about a woman trying to maintain her dignity while wearing the marks of abuse. Next, I addressed the house. I swept up the glass from the broken picture frame in the hall, but I didn't throw it away. I put the shards in a clear plastic bag and placed it on the mantelpiece, right next to where the photo used to be. A silent exhibit. Then, I went to the kitchen. I needed this to look like a normal morning. I needed the contrast between the warmth of a home and the coldness of her crime to be jarring. I started baking. The smell of flour and butter is usually comforting, but today it was a weapon. I wanted the smell to waft upstairs. I wanted it to wake her up. I wanted her to smell bacon and think, I won. Mom is cooking for me. She's submitted. I laid out the good china, the Wedgwood pattern Arthur had bought me in England. I polished the silver. I set 4 places. 1 for me. 1 for Harriet. 1 for Frank. And 1 for the accused. At 6 a.m., Harriet arrived. She came in through the back door, dressed in her suit, looking like she was ready to sentence a cartel boss. "My God, Lorraine," she whispered when she saw my face. She reached out and touched my arm gently. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back instantly. "She will pay for this. I promise you." "I know," I said. "Frank is parking down the street. He's waiting for my signal." "Good," Harriet said. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "I drafted the revocation of the previous will. And I have the restraining order ready for Frank to file. We also have the affidavit regarding the bank accounts." We sat at the kitchen island, drinking black coffee, plotting the downfall of my only child. It was surreal. It was heartbreaking. But it was necessary. "She's going to say I'm crazy," I told Harriet. "She's going to say I fell." "Let her," Harriet said, her voice like grinding stones. "We have the background check on Brad. We have the text messages Frank pulled from Brad's phone. Don't ask me how he got them, he's a good detective. And we have the pills you found." "This isn't just he said," she said. "This is conspiracy." At 7 a.m., Frank texted, "In position." At 7:30 a.m., I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. The beast was awake. "Places," I said to Harriet. Harriet took her briefcase and walked to the dining room. She sat in Arthur's chair. She looked majestic and terrifying. I stood by the stove, flipping the last pancake. My hands were steady now. I heard the water running upstairs. I heard her footsteps. Thump. 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 The sound of a hangover. The sound of entitlement. I took a deep breath. I visualized the little girl she used to be, and I said a silent goodbye to her. I buried that memory deep in my heart, put a stone over it, and turned to face the door. When Stephanie walked in, she looked terrible. Her hair was a rat's nest, her makeup smeared. She was wearing a silk robe she had bought with my credit card. She stopped in the doorway, sniffing the air. "Bacon?" she grunted. She walked past me without looking at my face. She went straight to the coffee pot. "Well," she said, her back to me. "I see you decided to be sensible. Good girl." The disrespect was breathtaking. Good girl. Like I was a dog. "Breakfast is on the table," I said. She turned around, holding her mug. She finally looked at me. She saw the bruise. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not regret. Maybe satisfaction? You should put some ice on that, she said dismissively. You look hideous. Don't go outside today. I don't want the neighbors talking. I don't think we need to worry about the neighbors, I said. She smirked. Right. Because you're going to sign the papers, and then Brad and I will handle everything. You can just rest. She walked into the dining room. I followed her. I watched as she stopped. I watched as she saw Harriet. I watched as she saw the police officers stepping out from the shadows of the hallway where they had been waiting. I watched her world crumble. And I felt nothing. Just a quiet, cold peace. Good morning, Stephanie, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. I believe you know everyone here. The trap was sprung. The cage door had slammed shut. And now, the reckoning begins. The silence in the dining room was heavy, thick enough to choke on. Stephanie stood frozen, her hand still gripping the back of her chair, her eyes darting between Judge Harriet Vance sitting at the head of the table and the uniformed officers blocking the exit. Sit down, Stephanie, Harriet repeated. Her voice was calm, but it had the weight of a gavel-striking sound block. Stephanie sank into the chair, her silk robe slipping off one shoulder. She looked small suddenly. The bravado she wore like armor when she was bullying me in the middle of the night had evaporated in the face of real authority. This is ridiculous, Stephanie hissed, though her voice trembled. Mom, stop this charade. You're embarrassing yourself. The only person who should be embarrassed, Harriet said, opening the manila folder in front of her, is the woman who forged a mortgage application in her mother's name. The air left the room. Stephanie's eyes widened. I didn't. Harriet pulled out a document. It was a copy of a loan application from a predatory lender, dated 3 weeks ago. This is a request for a second mortgage on this property. $400,000. The signature at the bottom reads Lorraine Miller, but the handwriting analysis, which Detective Reynolds was kind enough to expedite, matches the samples we have of your writing, Stephanie. I looked at the paper. I hadn't known about this specific document until Harriet showed me earlier that morning. Seeing it there, on my dining table, made my stomach turn. She wasn't just trying to sell the house, she was trying to bleed it dry first. You were rejected, Harriet continued, sliding the paper across the lace tablecloth. Not because of the credit score, Lorraine's credit is impeccable. But because the bank called the house phone to verify, and you answered, pretending to be your mother. Unfortunately for you, the loan officer knew Lorraine personally from church. He flagged it as fraud immediately. Stephanie stared at the paper. Her face turned a blotchy red. I was doing it for us. The roof needs repairs. The pipes. The roof was replaced 5 years ago, I said, my voice cutting through her lies. And the pipes are copper. Stop lying, Stephanie. You needed the money for your debts. Frank Reynolds stepped forward then. He pulled out his notepad. We ran your financials, Ms. Miller. You have 3 maxed-out credit cards totaling $45,000. You have a civil judgment against you from your former business partner for embezzlement. And you owe a significant amount to let's call him a private lender, in Atlanta. A man known for breaking legs when he isn't paid. Stephanie shrank back in her chair. That's private information. You can't just, that's illegal. It's part of a criminal investigation, Frank said flatly. And it establishes motive. Motive for what? Stephanie shrieked, her voice cracking. For wanting to help my mother manage her assets? Yes, I have debts. That's why I came home. To get back on my feet. Is it a crime to be poor? It is not a crime to be poor, Stephanie, Harriet said, leaning forward, her eyes like lasers. It is a crime to attempt to steal a $3 million estate to cover your mistakes. And it is certainly a crime to try to legally incapacitate the owner of that estate so you can rob her blind. I never. Stephanie started to sob, those fake, practice tears I had seen 1,000 times. Mom, look at them. They're twisting everything. I love you. I just wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Taken care of? I asked. I reached into the pocket of my apron. My hand brushed against the cool, slick paper of the brochure I had found in her room. I pulled it out and slammed it onto the table. The glossy pamphlet slid across the wood and stopped right in front of her. Golden Horizons Assisted Living. State-funded. Budget-friendly. The photo on the front showed a grim brick building with barred windows. Is this how you wanted to take care of me? I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. This is the place you and Brad were discussing. The place where you were going to dump me once you got my signature. Stephanie looked at the brochure, then at me. The tears stopped instantly. Her face hardened into a mask of pure hatred. She knew the game was up, at least the financial part of it. You belong there, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. You're old. You're useless. You rattle around this big house like a ghost while I'm drowning. Why do you need all this? Why can't you just help me? Help you? I stood up, leaning over the table. I gave you a debt-free education. I gave you a car. I paid your rent for years. I helped you start 2 businesses that you ran into the ground because you were too lazy to work. I have helped you to the point of enabling you, Stephanie. But I will not help you dig my grave just so you can buy more vodka and impress a con artist boyfriend. He's not a con artist, she yelled. Brad loves me. He's the only one who understands me. Harriet let out a short, dry laugh. Oh, honey. You really haven't figured it out yet, have you? Stephanie looked confused. Figured what out? We'll get to Brad in a minute, Frank said, his hand resting on his belt. But first, we need to talk about the tea. The color drained from Stephanie's face again. This time, it wasn't fear of debt. It was the terror of a murderer caught with the weapon. The word tea hung in the air like toxic smoke. For months, that tea had been her ritual. Drink up, Mom. It's good for you. I remembered the way she would watch me take the first sip, her eyes unblinking, like a scientist observing a lab rat. I remembered the heavy, suffocating sleep that followed, the nightmares, the waking up feeling like my brain was wrapped in cotton wool. I don't know what you're talking about, Stephanie whispered. But she was pulling at a loose thread on her robe, unraveling it, just like her lies were unraveling. Frank walked over to the table. He was wearing latex gloves now. From his pocket, he produced a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the small vial of clear liquid I had photographed in her room just hours before. Haloperidol, Frank said. Also known as Haldol. It's a powerful antipsychotic. It's not sold over the counter. It's certainly not something a healthy 62-year-old woman should be ingesting without a prescription. He placed the bag on the table next to the nursing home brochure. We executed a search warrant on your room while you were in the shower, Stephanie, Frank said. We found this in your nightstand. We also found a mortar and pestle with white residue that tested positive for benzodiazepines. Stephanie shook her head frantically. Those aren't mine. Mom must have put them there. She's trying to frame me. She's crazy, I told you. Stop it, I said. My voice was quiet, but it silenced her. Stop lying. I was a nurse for 40 years, Stephanie. Do you think I don't know the symptoms? The muscle stiffness? The confusion? The tremors? You were overdosing me. You were poisoning me. I was helping you sleep, she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. You were wandering around at night. You were talking to Dad's ghost. You needed to calm down. I was wandering around because you were blasting music at 2 a.m. I yelled back. I was talking to your father because I missed the only person in this house who ever loved me. You weren't treating a patient, Stephanie. You were creating one. Harriet interjected, her voice icy. Creating a patient so you could declare her incompetent. That was the plan, wasn't it? Phase 3 in the notebook? Stephanie froze. What notebook? Frank pulled out another evidence bag. The spiral-bound notebook. This one. The one where you and Brad outlined the step-by-step destruction of your mother. Phase 3, increase dosage. Phase 4, provoke outburst. Stephanie looked at the notebook as if it were a bomb. That's just, we were writing a screenplay, she stammered, grasping at straws so thin they were invisible. Brad is a writer. It's fiction. Is it? Frank asked. Because at 4 a.m. this morning, your mother called me to report that you had assaulted her. That fits phase 4 perfectly. You wanted her to hit you back, didn't you? You wanted a domestic violence charge against her so you could get emergency custody. Stephanie didn't answer. She slumped in her chair, defeated. Attempted murder, Harriet said. She let the words sink in. In the state of South Carolina, poisoning a family member with the intent to defraud or cause harm carries a mandatory prison sentence. We aren't talking about probation, Stephanie. We are talking about 10 to 20 years. I didn't mean to kill her. Stephanie cried, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time, tears of self-preservation. I just wanted her to be pliable. Brad said it wouldn't hurt her. He said it was safe. Brad said, I repeated, feeling a wave of nausea. You trusted a man you met 3 months ago over the woman who gave you life. You were willing to risk my brain, my heart, my life, just because Brad said. He loves me. Stephanie wailed. Does he? Frank asked. He pulled out his phone. Because we picked up Brad Mitchell at his apartment at 6:30 this morning. We found him packing a suitcase. He had a one-way ticket to Costa Rica booked for noon today. Stephanie went still. No. That's a lie. We were going to go together, after the house sold. He was leaving alone, Stephanie, Frank said brutally. And when we brought him in for questioning? When we showed him the texts between you two? He didn't protect you. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He started talking immediately. I watched my daughter's face as the last illusion of her life shattered. He told us everything, Frank continued. He said it was all your idea. He said you begged him to get the drugs. He said you were the one who stomped on the pills. He's cutting a deal, Stephanie. He's turning state's witness against you. No! Stephanie screamed. It was a primal sound, a howl of betrayal. She stood up, knocking her chair over. He wouldn't. He loves me. We were partners. You were a mark, Harriet said. He saw a desperate, greedy, entitled woman with a rich mother, and he played you like a fiddle. And now, he's going to walk away with a light sentence while you rot in prison for poisoning your own mother. Stephanie looked around the room, wild-eyed. She looked at the police, at Harriet, and finally at me. There was no love in her eyes. Only the realization that she was completely, utterly alone. The dining room, usually a place of warmth and holiday dinners, felt like a cage. Stephanie stood panting, the overturned chair between us like a barricade. Her face was a ruin of smeared mascara and splotchy red rage. You did this, she pointed a shaking finger at me. You turned him against me. You always ruin everything. If you had just given me the money, none of this would have happened. It's your fault. Even now. Even with the evidence on the table, the police at the door, and her lover betraying her, she couldn't take responsibility. It was always someone else's fault. It was always my fault. I felt something inside me finally die. It was the last thread of hope. The hope that somewhere inside this monster, my little girl still existed. The hope that if I just loved her enough, sacrificed enough, she would come back to me. But love cannot cure evil. And enabling isn't love, it's slow suicide. I walked around the table. The officers tensed, ready to step in, but I held up a hand. I needed to do this. I needed to look her in the eye. I stopped 3 feet from her. I looked at the bruise on my arm where she had grabbed me hours before. My fault? I asked softly. Is it my fault that you dropped out of college twice? Is it my fault that you cheated on your husband? Is it my fault that you stole my jewelry? Is it my fault that you decided to put poison in my tea instead of getting a job? I deserve that money, she spat. I am your daughter. It's my inheritance. Inheritance is a gift, Stephanie, not a right, I said, my voice rising, gaining strength with every word. It is what parents leave behind to help their children build a future. But you don't want to build. You want to consume. You are a black hole, Stephanie. You suck in light, love, and money, and you give back nothing but darkness. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't evidence. It was something Harriet and I had drafted at the kitchen island just 30 minutes ago. This, I said, holding it up, is a holographic codicil to my will. In South Carolina, it's legal if it's handwritten and witnessed. Harriet and Frank have already signed as witnesses. Stephanie stared at the paper. What is that? It's my new will, I said. As of this morning, you are disinherited. Completely. Not a dime. Not a stick of furniture. Not a single brick of this house. You can't do that, she screamed. I'll contest it. I'll sue you. You can try, Harriet interjected from the table. But with a criminal conviction for attempted murder of the testator? Good luck finding a judge who will listen to you. I took a step closer to her. The house, I said, will be sold. The proceeds will go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. The money you wanted so badly? It's going to save children who actually fight for their lives, instead of a woman who tries to end her mother's. Stephanie looked at me with pure horror. Mom, please. You can't. I have nothing. You have exactly what you earned, I said. You have consequences. But I'm your daughter, she wailed, the anger turning into a manipulative whine again. Mom, please. Don't let them take me. I'm scared. Jail? I can't go to jail. I'm sorry. I'll go to rehab. I swear. I looked at her tears. Yesterday, they would have broken me. Today, I saw them for what they were, water. Just water. You aren't sorry you hurt me, Stephanie, I said, my voice dead calm. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the plan didn't work. And honestly? I don't care anymore. I turned to Frank. Detective Reynolds. I would like to press charges. For assault. For fraud. And for attempted murder. Mom! Stephanie shrieked, lunging toward me. The 2 officers moved faster than I thought possible. Before she could touch me, they had her arms twisted behind her back. Stephanie Miller, Frank intoned, his voice heavy and official. You are under arrest. Get off me. Get off me, she thrashed, kicking at the officers. Mom! Help me. Mom! I turned my back. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. I heard the click of the handcuffs, snick snick. It was a cold, mechanical sound. It sounded like the lock of a prison cell. It sounded like freedom. "You're going to rot in hell for this," she screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "I hate you. I hate you." I didn't turn around. I watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder Arthur had built. It was bright red against the green leaves. Life went on. "I love you, Stephanie," I whispered to the glass. "But I love myself enough to let you go." The screaming continued all the way down the hallway. It was a raw, ugly sound that echoed off the high ceilings and bounced against the family portraits lining the walls, portraits of a smiling baby, a beaming graduate, a blushing bride. All lies now. Or maybe they were just ghosts of people who no longer existed. I stayed by the window, but I couldn't help but glance toward the front yard. The sun was fully up now, bathing the street in cheerful morning light. It was a beautiful day for a tragedy. I saw the neighbors coming out onto their porches. Mrs. Gable across the street, clutching her robe. Mr. Henderson, pausing with his dog. They watched as 2 police officers dragged my daughter, the girl who used to sell them Girl Scout cookies, down the front steps. Stephanie was fighting them. Her silk robe was torn, her hair wild. She looked like a banshee. She was screaming obscenities that made the neighbors flinch. "She's crazy. My mother is crazy. She's framing me," she yelled, trying to twist away from the officer's grip. Then she saw Frank leading her toward the squad car. She saw the neighbors watching. And for a moment, the fight went out of her. The shame finally hit. She slumped, her head dropping to her chest, and allowed them to push her into the back seat. The door slammed shut. Thud. That sound. It was final. It was the sound of a book closing. The cruiser pulled away, lights flashing but no sirens, just as I had asked. Frank stayed behind for a moment, talking to Harriet on the porch. Then he got into his unmarked car and followed them. The silence that rushed back into the house was deafening. It wasn't peaceful. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of my lungs. My legs gave out. I didn't faint, I just collapsed. I sank onto the window seat, my body trembling so hard my teeth chattered. The adrenaline was leaving my system, and the crash was brutal. Lorraine. Harriet was there instantly. She didn't treat me like a fragile old woman, she treated me like a comrade who had just survived a battle. She sat beside me and wrapped a firm arm around my shoulders. "Breathe," she commanded softly. "In through the nose, out through the mouth." "It's over." "Is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She's my baby, Harriet." "I just sent my baby to prison." "No," Harriet said firmly, turning my face to look at her. "You sent a predator to prison. The baby you remember? She died a long time ago, Lorraine. The woman who walked out of here today was willing to kill you for a condo. Never forget that." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I know. But it hurts, Harriet. It hurts more than the slap." "I know it does," she said. She pulled a tissue from her sleeve and wiped my face. "But pain means you're alive. And thanks to what you did today, you are alive. If you hadn't called Frank, if you had drunk that tea last night." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We both looked at the empty place setting where Stephanie had sat. The nursing home brochure was still there. "She was going to bury me," I whispered. "Yes," Harriet said. "But you dug yourself out." We sat there for a long time. The coffee on the table went cold. The biscuits I had baked sat untouched, a feast for no one. Eventually, Harriet stood up. "I'm going to call a cleaning service," she said. "I don't want you cleaning up this mess." And then, I'm calling a locksmith. We are changing every lock in this house before noon. Thank you, I said. And Lorraine? Harriet paused at the doorway. You aren't staying here alone tonight. You're coming to my house. Or I'm staying here. Your choice. But no one fights alone today. I looked around my dining room. The morning sun was hitting the chandelier, scattering rainbows across the walls. It was still my house. It was still Arthur's house. The stain of Stephanie's presence was deep, but it wasn't permanent. I'll stay here, I said. This is my home. I'm not letting her chase me out of it. Harriet smiled, a genuine, proud smile. That's the head nurse Miller I remember. She went to the kitchen to make calls. I stayed by the window. I touched the bruise on my cheek. It throbbed, a steady drumbeat of pain. But under the pain, there was something else. A strange, unfamiliar sensation. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs without fear. It was safety. For the first time in 2 years, I was safe in my own home. The days following the arrest were a blur of procedural bureaucracy and public scrutiny. I thought the hardest part was over when the handcuffs clicked, but I was wrong. The hardest part was the evidence. Frank drove me to the hospital, my old hospital, St. Jude's, for a toxicology panel. It was humiliating to walk into the ER where I used to be the boss, now a patient with a battered face and a police escort. The nurses whispered. Some recognized me and looked away in shock. But the results were the vindication I needed. My blood tested positive for high levels of haloperidol and benzodiazepines. The doctor, a young man who didn't know me, looked at the chart with wide eyes. Mrs. Miller, he said gravely. The levels in your system, if you had continued this dosage for another week, you likely would have suffered permanent neurological damage. Or cardiac arrest. You are very lucky. Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt sick. My own daughter had been feeding me poison with a smile. When the results came back, the district attorney upgraded the charges. Stephanie was denied bail. The judge, a colleague of Harriet's, ruled that she was a flight risk and a danger to the community. Then came the fallout. In a small town, secrets don't exist. By the next morning, everyone knew. The Miller scandal was the talk of the grocery store, the beauty parlor, and the church. Most people were supportive. My phone rang off the hook with neighbors offering casseroles and apologies. We didn't know, they said. We thought she was just troubled. But not everyone was kind. Stephanie had friends, enablers, drinking buddies, people who only knew her side of the story. I went to the supermarket 3 days later. I needed to leave the house, to prove to myself that I could. As I was reaching for a carton of milk, a woman I recognized, the mother of one of Stephanie's high school friends, stopped her cart next to mine. I hope you're happy, she sneered. I paused. Excuse me? Putting your own daughter in jail, she said, her voice loud enough to turn heads. Stephanie told my daughter everything. How you cut her off. How you wouldn't help her when she was depressed. She's sick, Lorraine. She needs rehab, not prison. What kind of mother calls the cops on her child? The old Lorraine would have hung her head. The old Lorraine would have mumbled an apology and fled. But the old Lorraine was dead. She died the night she was slapped. I straightened my spine. I looked this woman in the eye. The kind of mother who refuses to be murdered, I said loudly. The aisle went silent. Excuse me, the woman faltered. She poisoned me, Brenda, I said, my voice steady and projecting just like I used to in the ER waiting room. She put antipsychotics in my tea for 3 months. She forged a mortgage application to steal my home. She hit me in the face. Would you like to see the toxicology report? I have a copy in my purse. The woman turned pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't think so, I said. So unless you want to invite a poisoner into your home to live with your family, I suggest you keep your opinions about my survival to yourself. I put the milk in my cart and walked away. I felt eyes on my back, but I didn't care. I felt 10 feet tall. That afternoon, I called the contractor. I want the locks changed, I told him. But that's not all. I want cameras. Front door, back door, driveway. I want motion sensors on the windows. And I want a gate installed at the end of the driveway. Expecting trouble, Mrs. Miller? He asked gently. No, I said. I'm preventing it. I spent the next week purging the house. I went into Stephanie's room with heavy-duty trash bags. I didn't sort through her things with nostalgia. I packed everything, her clothes, her shoes, her endless collection of makeup, into boxes. I called a local women's shelter. I have a donation, I said. High-end clothing. Coats, shoes. Come pick it up. When the room was empty, stripped to the bare walls, I opened the windows to let the stale air out. I scrubbed the floors. I painted the walls a soft, serene yellow. I turned her bedroom into a sewing room. A place for me. A place to create, not destroy. It was a symbolic exorcism. I was reclaiming my territory, square foot by square foot. But the nights were still hard. I would wake up at 3 a.m., waiting for the sound of the key in the lock. Waiting for the screaming. I would have to turn on the bedside lamp and look at the new security monitor to reassure myself that the perimeter was secure. It takes a long time for the nervous system to unlearn fear. But I was patient. I had survived the poison. I could survive the silence. 2 weeks later, Frank called me. We need you to come down to the station, Lorraine. Brad Mitchell is formally allocating his plea deal today. We thought you might want to hear what he has to say. I didn't want to see him. The greaseball who had whispered poison into my daughter's ear. But I needed closure. I needed to know the extent of the betrayal. I sat behind the two-way mirror with Harriet and Frank. Brad sat in the interrogation room with his lawyer. He looked smaller than I remembered. Without his cheap suit and his arrogance, he looked like a frightened rat. Tell us about the timeline, the district attorney said. Brad leaned into the microphone. It started in June. Stephanie was complaining that the old bag, her words, was taking too long to die. She said she had debts. Big debts. A loan shark in Atlanta was threatening to hurt her. I flinched. She had been in danger. But instead of coming to me for help, she decided to sacrifice me. I told her about the real estate market, Brad continued, his voice monotone. I told her the land was worth more without the house. But we needed the power of attorney. Stephanie said you'd never sign it. She said you were stubborn. So you suggested the Haldol? The DA asked. No, Brad said, shaking his head. That was her idea. She stole it from a friend of hers whose mother had schizophrenia. She said, if we make her look crazy, we can get emergency guardianship. I just told her how much to use so it wouldn't kill her right away. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. And the night of the incident? We were celebrating, Brad said. We thought she was breaking. We thought one more push and she'd sign. Stephanie was drunk. She said, tonight's the night. I'm going to scare her into submission. I told her not to hit you. I told her marks leave evidence. But she was out of control. I closed my eyes. He was trying to minimize his role, of course. But the picture was clear. They were a team. A partnership of parasites. Stephanie is claiming you masterminded the whole thing, the DA said. Brad snorted. Stephanie couldn't mastermind a lunch order. She was the one who wanted the money. I was just helping. Helping yourself to 20% of the sale, the DA noted. Yeah, well. Business is business. I had heard enough. I signaled to Frank that I wanted to leave. Walking out of the station, the sun felt too bright. He's going to get 5 years, Frank told me. In exchange for testifying against Stephanie. With his testimony, plus the physical evidence, Stephanie is looking at 15 years. Minimum. 15 years. She would be 47 when she got out. Her youth, her potential, her life, wasted. Is it worth it? I asked Frank. Giving him a deal? To lock her away? Yes, Frank said grimly. Lorraine, he's a con man. But she was the one who put the poison in the cup. She was the one who lived with you, ate your food, and watched you deteriorate. That takes a special kind of evil. He was right. Brad was a stranger who wanted money. Stephanie was my daughter who wanted me erased. I went home and went straight to the garden. I pulled weeds for 3 hours until my hands were raw and my back ached. I ripped out the invasive ivy that was choking my hydrangeas. I tore it out by the roots. Out, I grunted with every pull. Out. Out. I was clearing the rot from my life. It was painful work. But when I stood up and looked at the cleared bed of dark, rich soil, I saw potential. I saw room for something new to grow. 3 months passed. The leaves on the oak trees turned from green to golden russet. The air turned crisp. Stephanie was in the county jail, awaiting trial. She had fired 3 public defenders. She was apparently becoming a nightmare for the corrections officers, demanding special treatment, demanding organic food, demanding to see her mother. I refused every visitation request. I blocked the collect calls from the jail. Then, the letter arrived. It was a plain white envelope with the county jail stamp in the corner. My name was written in her handwriting, that looping, childish script I had once taught her. I sat on the porch swing, the envelope heavy in my hand. Harriet was with me. She didn't say anything, just sipped her tea and waited. I opened it. Dearest Mommy, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. Being in here, it's been a wake-up call. I've had so much time to think. I want you to know that I forgive you. I stopped reading. I looked at Harriet. She forgives me? Keep reading, Harriet said dryly. It gets better, I'm sure. I forgive you for calling the police. I know you were confused. I know the drugs Brad gave you made you paranoid. That's why you thought I was hurting you. I wasn't, Mommy. I was trying to hold you up when you fell. The bruise? You hit the counter. Brad is a liar. He twisted everything. He made me do things I didn't want to do. He threatened me, Mom. I was a victim of domestic abuse, just like you thought you were. I was scared of him. That's why I didn't tell you. Please, Mom. You can't let me rot in here. The lawyer says if you drop the charges, or if you tell the judge you might have been mistaken about the pills, I can come home. I'll take care of you. I'll make it up to you. I'm your little girl. Do you remember when we went to Disney World? Do you remember when you promised Daddy you'd always look out for me? Don't break your promise to Daddy. I love you so much. Please get me out. Love, Steph. I lowered the letter. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Gaslighting, you were paranoid. Victim blaming, I forgive you. Rewriting history, Brad made me. Emotional blackmail, promise to daddy. There wasn't a single word of genuine remorse. Not one, I'm sorry I hurt you. Just, I'm sorry I'm in here. She was still trying to play me. She thought I was still the weak, lonely widow she could twist around her finger. She thought mentioning Arthur would break me. But she was wrong. Mentioning Arthur didn't break me. It clarified things. Arthur hated liars. And he hated bullies. She hasn't changed, I said to Harriet. She hasn't learned a thing. Narcissists rarely do, Harriet said. They just change their tactics. What are you going to do? I stood up. I'm going inside. I walked into the living room, to the fireplace where a small fire was crackling to ward off the autumn chill. I looked at the letter one last time. I promised your father I would look out for you, I whispered to the paper. And I am. I'm looking out for the rest of the world by keeping you away from it. I tossed the letter into the fire. I watched the paper curl. The blue ink of her handwriting turned black, then gray, then ash. The words "Dearest Mommy" vanished in a burst of orange flame. It was over. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for her to change. I was done waiting. I went to the kitchen and called the district attorney. This is Lorraine Miller, I said. I received a letter from the defendant. I would like to turn it over to you. It appears she is trying to tamper with a witness. We'll send someone to pick it up. Oh, wait, do you have it? I burned it, I said. But I can tell you exactly what it said. And I want you to tell her lawyer that if she contacts me again, I will add harassment to the list of charges. Understood, Mrs. Miller. I hung up. I felt lighter. Lighter than I had felt in 20 years. The trial took place 6 months later. I didn't have to testify in person, my deposition and the overwhelming physical evidence were enough. Plus, Brad's testimony was devastating. He painted a picture of a Lady Macbeth, driven by greed and spite. Stephanie took a plea deal at the last minute to avoid the maximum sentence. She pleaded guilty to assault in the first degree, fraud, and administering a noxious substance. She was sentenced to 12 years in state prison. I wasn't in the courtroom when the gavel fell. I was in my garden. I had hired a landscaping crew with the money I saved from not paying Stephanie's debts. We had ripped out the old, overgrown bushes where she used to hide her vodka bottles. We had planted roses. Dozens of them. Deep red Mr. Lincoln roses, Arthur's favorite. And white iceberg roses for new beginnings. When Frank called to tell me the sentence, I was on my knees in the dirt, planting the last bush. 12 years, Frank said. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 if she behaves. Thank you, Frank, I said. For everything. You did the hard part, Lorraine, he said. You saved yourself. I hung up and looked around. The garden was beautiful. It was orderly. It was mine. I sat on the stone bench Arthur had built. I closed my eyes and listened to the birds. For so long, this house had been filled with noise, Stephanie's music, her yelling, the TV blaring, the slamming doors. Now, there was just the wind in the oaks and the distant hum of a lawnmower. It wasn't a lonely silence anymore. It was a peaceful silence. I thought about Stephanie sitting in a cell. I felt a pang of sadness, the biological ache of a mother. But I wrapped that sadness in logic and set it aside. She was where she needed to be. She was safe from herself, and I was safe from her. I went inside. The house was bright. I had repainted the hallway where the assault happened. I had bought a new console table. On it, I placed a new photo of Arthur, one where he was laughing on a fishing trip. And next to it, I placed a photo of myself, taken last week at Harriet's birthday party. I looked happy. I looked strong. I went to my sewing room, Stephanie's old room. I sat at my machine. I was making quilts for the babies at St. Jude's. The fabric was soft and colorful under my fingers. I was creating warmth. I was creating comfort. I was back to being a nurse, in my own way. That evening, Harriet came over with a bottle of champagne. To justice, she said, raising her glass. To peace, I corrected her, clinking my glass against hers. So, Harriet said, settling onto the sofa. What now? You have a big house, a lot of time, and you're a free woman. I smiled. I'm thinking of traveling. I've never been to Italy. Arthur always wanted to go. Italy? Harriet's eyes lit up. I've never been either. Do you need a travel companion? I think I might, I said. And just like that, the future opened up. It wasn't a dark tunnel anymore. It was a wide, open road. Before I could go to Italy, there was one last secret the house had to give up. I was cleaning out the attic a week later, preparing for my trip. I wanted to make sure everything was organized. In the far corner, behind a stack of old holiday decorations, I found a loose floorboard. It looked disturbed. The dust around it was smeared. My heart gave a little jump. Old habits die hard. I grabbed a crowbar. I pried the board up. Underneath, nestled in the insulation, was a metal lockbox. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I didn't have the key, but a hammer made short work of the latch. Inside were stacks of cash. Rubber-banded bundles of 20s and 50s. I counted it roughly. Nearly $30,000. And under the cash, there was jewelry. My jewelry. The diamond earrings I thought I had lost at the grocery store. The sapphire brooch Arthur gave me that vanished 2 years ago. The gold bracelet my mother left me. Stephanie hadn't sold them. She had stolen them and hoarded them. She was keeping a stash. A go-bag fund. I sat on the attic floor, holding my sapphire brooch. I remembered how I had cried when I lost it. I remembered Stephanie hugging me, saying, "Oh Mom, you really are getting forgetful. You probably dropped it in the garden." She had held me while wearing the lie like a second skin. The sheer malice of it took my breath away. It wasn't just about money. It was about power. She enjoyed watching me panic. She enjoyed watching me doubt my own mind. I felt a flash of the old anger, but it passed quickly. She couldn't hurt me with this anymore. I took the cash. $30,000. Stolen from my purse, my accounts, maybe even from her friends over the years. I knew exactly what to do with it. I didn't put it back in the bank. I didn't spend it on my trip. I drove to the women's shelter in town. The one that helps victims of domestic violence escape their abusers. I walked into the director's office and placed the box on her desk. "This is an anonymous donation," I said. "Use it for legal fees. Use it for therapy. Use it to help women get restraining orders against the people who claim to love them." The director opened the box and gasped. "Mrs. Miller, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure," I said. Driving home, I felt the final weight lift off my shoulders. The last vestige of Stephanie's poison was gone. I had turned her greed into someone else's freedom. I went home, packed my suitcase, and called Harriet. "Book the tickets," I said. "We're going to Rome." It has been 1 year since the police led my daughter out of my house in handcuffs. I am writing this from my sunroom, looking out at the azaleas which are in full bloom. The house smells of lemon polish and fresh coffee. It is quiet, but it is a happy quiet. I went to Italy. I ate pasta in Rome, drank wine in Tuscany, and rode a gondola in Venice. I laughed more in those 3 weeks than I had in the previous 3 years. I realized that life doesn't stop at 62. In many ways, it's just beginning. I visit Stephanie occasionally. Not in person, I'm not ready for that, and I may never be. But I send her books. I send her money for the commissary, enough for toothpaste and shampoo, not enough for favors. She writes to me. The letters are changing. The manipulation is less frequent. She's angry, yes. But she's also sober. For the first time in a decade, she is facing reality without a chemical buffer. Whether she becomes a better person is up to her. I can't do the work for her. I never could. I've learned a hard lesson, one that I paid a high price for. I learned that a mother's love is powerful, but it shouldn't be suicidal. I learned that family is not a free pass for abuse. There are women reading this right now who are where I was. You are walking on eggshells in your own home. You are checking your bank accounts with a knot in your stomach. You are wondering if you are crazy because someone you love tells you that you are. You are not crazy. You are being hunted. And you have a choice. It is the hardest choice you will ever make. It feels like tearing your own heart out. But you have to choose yourself. You have to draw the line. You have to change the locks. You have to make the call. Because if you don't save yourself, no one else will. I look at the photo of Arthur on the mantelpiece. He looks proud. I finally feel like the woman he married again. Strong. Capable. Free. My name is Lorraine Miller. I am a survivor. And this house? This isn't a museum of the past anymore. It's my home. And the only people allowed through that front door are people who treat it, and me, with respect. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but the truth rarely is. If you've made it this far, if you've walked this dark road with me and come out into the light, I have one last favor to ask. Please, like this video and share it. Not for me. But for the woman who needs to hear it. For the mother who is afraid to say no. For the grandmother who thinks she has no options. Share it so they know they are not alone. Share it so they know that it is never, ever too late to take back your power. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life to save yourself? How did you find the courage? I read every single comment, and your stories give me strength. Stay strong, ladies. And remember, you are worth defending. And so, as Lorraine's story closes, it leaves us with a profound reminder: self-worth is not negotiable, even in the face of love or family. Her journey teaches us that resilience is born from the hardest decisions, the courage to protect oneself, even when it means walking away from those we once held dearest. It is a testament to the strength hidden within us all, waiting to rise when survival demands it. This story isn't just about betrayal or justice, it's about reclaiming power. It's about understanding that love should never be a tool for control or manipulation. Lorraine's strength shows us that boundaries are acts of self-respect, and sometimes, the most loving thing we can do, for ourselves and for others, is to say, enough. What are your thoughts on Lorraine's courage? Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect your peace? Share your perspective below, or simply comment good if you found this lesson meaningful. Let's inspire one another to stand strong.